issues that matter. King 5 News up front.
I don't know what you tax. You can't tax individuals. They're struggling. They're struggling to put food on the table. Our food banks are overwhelmed. Overwhelmed. You can't tax business. Some of them are hanging on by their fingernails. You can't tax folks at their property tax. So I don't know what you tax in these kind of dramatically difficult times.
Joining us now is Remy Trupin, Executive Director of the Washington Budget and Policy Center, and Dann Mead Smith, President of the Washington Policy Center, a free market-oriented think tank. Gentlemen, thanks for being with us. In regards to the budget, which is deficit about $6 billion, a ranking Republican on the Senate Ways and Means Committee says, I don't see how they can get around it without raising revenue. The majority leader in the Senate has not ruled out tax and fee increases. Mr. Trupin, can we balance the state budget without a tax increase?
Well, I think we have to look at where we want to be in 2 years when we come out of this budget deficit, and hopefully the economic cycle is turning around in 2 years. And that's the criteria that we need to be thinking about are, A, do we protect all of the people that need protection when we are in a crisis like this? Are we making sure that the disabled are being protected? Are we making sure that people have access to health care? And then second, that our state economy is put in a situation where we can be globally competitive and that the kids have continued to have access to higher ed. So the question is that if we are going to do those things, we have to have all reasonable options on the table.
Okay, but you can't say today whether tax increases will be part of the package.
I don't know what the legislature will do. I think if they have a reasonable conversation, that all those options should be on the table.
Mr. Mead Smith, what about it? Increasing taxes to balance a budget? Huge deficit.
Right.
Huge deficit.
Absolutely not. But remember, we're going to have more revenue in this next biennium than we have previously. $1.4 billion more is coming from state taxpayers to Olympia. So this is not a revenue problem, it's a spending problem. And we're optimistic. We see this as a great opportunity for the state to rethink how they deliver services. And the governor and the incoming chair of the House Ways and Means Committee has said the same thing. This is an opportunity to rethink state government and not an opportunity to rethink how we bring in more revenue.
For you, a spending problem?
Absolutely.
What about you, Mr. Trupin?
I think it's clearly we have not been having spending that's been out of control. If you measure our spending over a 10-year cycle, essentially since Initiative 601 took effect, we have been spending at a flat level in terms of a portion of our economy measured by personal income. It has not been out of control, and if we look towards the next biennium when we have this significant revenue problem, we're going to be dropping state spending way below the norm that we've set for the last 10 years. So it's clearly a revenue problem. We've also limited our options through bad choices through legislative action and voter initiative in terms of what revenue is available for those the long-term support of our values.
Some of the consequences of the budget deficit, there's a new study that says the state of Washington gets an F for the affordability of college, and it also grades, to be fair, 47 other states given an F. And we're facing, at least it's been proposed, a 20% higher education cut. Mr. Mead, doesn't that mean that in the future that we have a less educated, a smaller educated workforce available for business in the state?
Well, I don't think we need to do a 20% cut to begin with. I think if we did do a cut, possibly, but I don't think a 20% cut is necessary. Again, look at the way that the states, universities, and colleges operate. We know they can do it more efficiently. Use competitive bidding for university services and state services, so the private sector can bid with the state government on how to provide services. There's efficiencies in our state university system, and there's no need for a 20% cut.
But there's going to be some cut, though, and in the end it falls on the students and the parents of the students that pay tuition that really will go up, and that's in essence a tax increase.
Well, we don't know it's going to be a cut on higher ed, though. That's just one idea. I mean, there's hundreds of ideas and places to cut in state government. We don't know it's going to be on higher ed, and we need to protect what we think are higher priorities. Vulnerable populations and education are two areas. So those are areas that you don't start with.
Let's move again to education. K through 12. There could be cuts in K through 12 education. Is it possible to still fulfill the mandate to fully fund basic education with what the budget deficit is going to be and what projected budget offering might look like?
Well, I think the magnitude of the problem is far beyond what Mr. Smith is laying out there. Yesterday, the Senate Ways and Means Committee, trying to contextualize what is currently a $6 billion problem, which will probably grow with the next revenue forecast, laid out an option to close $6 billion of a budget deficit, which would completely eliminate all higher education funding and all funding towards corrections. So the magnitude of the cuts are far beyond just small pinpoint spending decreases. So everything is clearly on the table in this discussion, and we believe, again, that a reasonable discussion would also talk about revenue.
If it's a matter of revenue, is there anyone in the legislature who could back tax increases?
I think that there are reasonable people clearly all over the place that understand that the magnitude of the problem has increased. We're one of at least 43 states at this point that has a current or projected budget deficit. This is part of a global financial crisis, and we should have all options on the table. And I think, yes, there are people who will come to the conclusion that we need to broaden our discussion just from spending decreases.
There's been a suggestion that the legislature put together a package, a budget package that would include some tax increases, pass it by simple majority, move it on to the voters. Is that a good idea?
No, absolutely not. It's not necessary. There's people in Olympia that think that by having more revenue, that will solve the problem. It won't solve the problem at all. We'll be right back into the same problem in 2 years, because if we don't do a sustainable budget and get control of our spending, we're going to have the same deficit problem that we face now. So by just looking at revenue is not going to change the structural function of government or the state budget, and it's not fair to taxpayers.
Very quickly, is it time to consider a state income tax?
Absolutely not. That doesn't even need to be on the table this year, again, because this is not a revenue problem. This is a spending problem. So we don't need additional revenue or additional tax sources. We need to look at the way the state delivers services and the way that the state produces a state budget.
State income tax?
I don't think it resolves our problem at this point. There are other tools that need to be on the table at this point.
Mr. Trupin, Mr. Mead Smith, thank you very much for being with us. We continue this debate online. With the state budget in a huge hole, what do you think? Is it time for Olympia to raise taxes or keep cutting until it hurts? Type in king5.com/upfront.